The boy sat on the cold ground, which unpleasantly caressed the skin of his knees. Moisture seeped into the fabric of his trousers, and the chill slowly crept into his bones. Before him stood a lamp crowned with a green fungus. Its unsteady light drove away the curious darkness lurking just beyond the edge of its glow. The darkness did not disappear completely. Pushed back, patient, it seemed only to be waiting. The dirty shirt, cinched with a pink sash, looked like an element of clothing entirely unsuited to this place, as if the boy had ended up here by accident. From afar came the sound of a cane striking the ground rhythmically. An old man sat on a stone, bored, dressed in garish robes resembling rags sewn together from multicolored scraps of trash. Each tap of the cane mingled with the accompaniment of nocturnal creatures, grinding their mandibles in the darkness. Thousands of legs clicked against the rocky soil, forming a ghastly, almost hypnotic concert. They were afraid to come closer. The green light effectively kept them away from their food, for that was the only thing one could call humans here. The stench of rot no longer bothered anyone. They had grown accustomed to it. A strange taste spread through the boy's mouth. He licked something fiercely as if trying to reach its center. Crunch, crunch. Pieces broke off the little ball, and with every movement they grated unpleasantly between his teeth, as if someone had poured sand between his bones. He no longer knew whether it was clay or fragments of his own teeth. "So?" the master asked without looking up. "It tastes earthy, I think," the boy replied, pulling the saliva-soaked ball of clay from his mouth. The old man snorted. "Today's youth." With a deft motion, he struck the boy on the head with his cane. It wasn't a blow that could knock him down, but it certainly wasn't gentle. "An alchemist is an artist," he snarled. "We have such a wealth of words, and you chose earthy. That's not enough to form a bond with the medium. Rain, by Gaia, I can see your future as clearly as day." "But I really don't feel anything else," the boy protested. "Then shove the medium up your ass. You'll definitely feel something," the old man snapped back. As always, one question remained. Was he serious? Rain sat there, bewildered, not knowing what to do. His master was an eccentric, like every alchemist, really. They were considered a band of lunatics, but powerful enough that no one in their right mind would dare say it to their faces. "Naru, my medium," the old man began, sudden longing in his eyes. His voice was swallowed by the sounds of the wild. "Shut your damn mouths, carrion," he shouted, coughing afterward. It did nothing, but the old man merely smiled and tried to outshout nature. "It tastes like bitterness that slowly dissolves in the mouth. Like morning, cold, neutral, but filled with hope for new times. It gently pricks the tongue, slips between the teeth, sometimes wounds. Over time, soaked by saliva, it softens and separates into layers. Like a wave, like pain, it eases with time, it changes. Naru." The moment he spoke the name, the space began to swirl. Beside him appeared a piece of wood that instantly grew, stretching and forming into the body of a woman. The figure knelt and wrapped the old man in an unusually tender embrace, waiting for further orders. "This is Rain," the master said calmly, "a homunculus, a creation of alchemy, something that defies physical boundaries." The figure nodded and vanished as if she had never been there. "What is alchemy?" the master asked. "And what are its kinds?" The old man rose from the stone and began to circle the boy slowly, scratching his long, tangled beard. "Alchemy is a related science, combining herbalism, magic, philosophy, and psychology," Rain recited, as if repeating a formula he had read countless times. "We learn to change the state of things, to change the world through thought." "Everything is and is not," the master interrupted. He pulled a piece of breakfast from his beard, examined it carefully, then brought it close to his mouth. Seeing the boy's grimace, he shrugged and flicked the find onto the ground with an untrimmed fingernail. Continue. We divide alchemy into white, black, and red, Rain continued proudly. White animates matter and minerals. Black creates emoji, entities that have no right to exist. Red animates the components of our bodies. The most important principle of alchemy? The old man asked, sitting back down on the stone. Do not doubt, Rain answered, lowering his gaze. Yes, all our power lies in the fact that we believe, and the world begins to believe along with us. Doubt, and you will be punished. An alchemist is only as strong as his convictions. Continue forming the bond. Rain looked at the ball of clay, brushing his thick brown curls from his forehead. With milky white eyes, he stared at the material on which someone had drawn a simple smile. A pointed nose protruded from beneath his hood, and freckles covered his entire face. Hi, Ji-Yu, he said cheerfully. I had a busy day today. You wouldn't believe. The boy spoke to the medium as if talking to an old friend. In my day, apprentices were locked in a cave with their medium for several years. No contact with the outside world, the master sighed nostalgically. Master's kind of a pain in the ass, Rain blurted out. Before he could understand what he had said, he felt the familiar strike of the cane. Why? He wailed, rubbing his head with his hands as if it would help. Look, the master shouted, pointing at the ground. The ball of clay rolled slightly. Rain stared in disbelief as, for the first time, his medium responded. Reacted. His friend was beginning to be born. I suppose I'll have to beat you more often, the master concluded with clear satisfaction. All right, let's move on to smell and the remaining senses. Master Arus, how is your student? A male voice called from the other end of the table. In the cave stood a round table. Alchemists sat around it at equal distances, submerged in half-shadow, motionless like statues. At the very center stood a richly decorated lamp with a green fungus. Its light gave the place a sinister character. Shadows danced along the grotto walls, as if taking part in a ritual, unsettling dance. Rain is not ready, someone protested from the hall. You know well that we need additional hands for work, another voice replied, cold and emotionless. They don't study here for free. Arus raised his head. He can't even fully control his medium, and you want to send him to his death? Open contempt rang in his voice. He's not sacrificial meat. You know well that alchemy is a complex discipline. Training takes years. The silent monks are growing impatient, another voice interjected. We need alchemists on the dragons. You know that. I firmly object. Aris leapt to his feet and slammed his hands on the stone table. The echo reverberated through the cave. Aris, a female voice, spoke from the other end of the hall. You know what Gaia's envoys can be like. We'd rather deal with the anger of youngsters than with the silence itself. Ignoring the rest of the discussion, Aris left the chamber. Anger throbbed in his temples. How could he send someone who was almost like a son to him to certain death? The dragons roaming the darkness of Astrum provided shelter for the people living on their chitinous shells. One might ask, why would they need mages and alchemists? The answer was simple. The dragon protected against most nocturnal creatures. The rest had to be handled by trained specialists. These enormous insects wandered their entire lives, traversing the layers of the world, burrowing through earth and carving tunnels. Humans quickly learned to exploit this. They built villages and cities upon the beasts' shells, living with them in symbiosis, removing parasites in exchange for protection. It had always been so. Aris stormed toward the apprentices' barracks. He passed others without paying them the slightest attention. Only one thing remained. He could do what he always did, push his student harder. Perhaps that would increase his chances of survival. As he walked, he failed to notice the low ceiling and struck his forehead against it with force. Several passers-by looked at him in surprise. He brushed off his robes as if nothing had happened and continued on, toward the surface, toward his goal. When he stepped outside, he felt a tremor. Nothing unusual. They were on a creature that constantly traversed a dense network of tunnels. Evenly spaced lamps illuminated the fields. Aris walked between them toward the barracks. Farmers and mycologists cultivating fungi bowed to the old alchemist, uneasily, with clear distance. Everyone knew that the worst thing one could do was make an enemy of an alchemist. The barracks doors burst open, slamming against the cave wall. In the half-light, apprentices slept in neat rows. Master Aris, lighting his way with a lamp, searched for his student's bed. "Hey, what the hell? I'm sleeping here," an irritated voice called out. "And I'm walking here in a bad mood," the old man snapped. "If you don't want to sleep forever, shut up and help me find Rain." The boy turned pale and pointed with a trembling finger at one of the pallets. Aris approached and struck the bedding with his cane. A groan of displeasure answered him. What's going on?" Rain mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Get up. We're doing additional training," the master announced with a grin, clearly amused. "Great," the boy groaned. "Tell me, Rain," Aris began, sitting on a stone and tapping his foot in boredom. "What prohibitions exist in alchemy?" "You must not love your creation," a weary Rain replied, sniffing the ball of clay. "Why? Shouldn't every artist love his work? By loving the medium, we idealize it, and it begins to live its own life. It rebels." "Good. Now listen," the old man called. Rain closed his eyes and, gently tapping the clay ball, listened to the sounds. "Master, may I ask a question? If you must. Nothing smart ever comes out of that mouth anyway. What are these extra trainings for?" he asked, opening his eyes. Aris sighed heavily. "The Order of the Silent needs new alchemists. In my opinion, you're like newborn children, but they're pushing. They need you for something, though they weren't kind enough to explain what." They sat like that for hours, until the boy began to nod off while sitting. The pensive master knelt beside the sleeping Rain. With his fingers, he brushed the dirty earth and began drawing a mustache on the boy's face. Well, maybe that's how you'll look when you grow up," he muttered. "If you survive." Aris looked at the boy with hidden concern. Though he was always demanding, he could form bonds with his students, not through tenderness, but through trial. The world was cruel, and so the methods could not be gentle. Tempering spirit and body was a gift for the future, not a punishment. Thus the master, despite his severity, hid a gentler side deep within himself, beyond the reach of his students' eyes, where weakness could exist without the risk of being exploited. Aris settled onto the stone and kept watch over his sleeping student. "Be as hard as stone." The monk's voice did not echo through the air. It crawled directly into the minds of those present, heavy and cold as rock. In the vast church, rows of pews vanished into half-shadow, and at the very end of the nave stood a bald, pale man. His eye sockets were sewn shut with thick thread. His mouth and chin were crossed by stitches, as if someone had tried to seal words inside him forever. He had no ears or nose. His face was stripped of everything human. On his forehead pulsed the symbol of a bleeding eye, alive, wet, as if breathing to its own rhythm. Dressed in black, tattered robes, he resembled a wraith more than an envoy of Gaia. Around him stood 12 boys. Pink sashes tied at their hips clearly marked their role, alchemists. Throughout the church stood 12 statues with indistinct faces. At their feet knelt people, bent, silent, hands clasped in desperate prayer. Today, in the presence of the 12 most faithful stars, the gods of our world, we will choose new alchemists. The words again resounded in the minds of the faithful. A whisper passed through the pews, delicate as a breath of wind stirring dust. The monk moved slowly, circling the boys. His steps were nearly soundless. He raised his hand and pointed at those chosen. They stepped forward with pride, with relief, with naive joy, as if they saw it as an honor, until finally the finger stopped on Rain. The boy obediently stepped out of line. He had always feared monks. They were considered envoys of the brightest star, Mother Gaia, who had answered the prayers of those lost in darkness and sent dragons to humanity. He feared disappointing his master, who had done everything he could to help him find his place in the world. He was an alchemist, and who else, if not he, could afford to be without doubt? Long ago he had decided which path to take. Only one step remained, and not to doubt. Rain noticed the dissatisfied face of his master, sitting in one of the pews. In his gaze was something the boy had never seen before, pure fear, almost paternal concern. Rain's heart tightened painfully. Doubt sprouted within him like a thorn. "Follow me." At the end of the church, richly decorated stone doors ground open. The boys followed the monk, leaving the people behind. They descended long, winding stairs, deeper and deeper underground. At a fork, the priest stopped and silently divided them into two groups. Rain was left with one other boy. The rest vanished down a side corridor. Their path led to a chamber filled with silence and dampness. At its center lay a pool of crystal-clear water. In the middle stood a statue of a beautiful woman, from whose stone eyes streams of water flowed endlessly, like eternal tears. "You must wash your bodies, undergo the process of ablution, purification." Rain hesitantly removed his clothes and stepped into the water. It was so transparent it seemed as if it wasn't there at all. Warmth spread through his body, soft, soothing, paralyzing. The air was filled with the scent of flowers, sweet, heavy, almost narcotic. His muscles relaxed. Fear, doubt, concern for his master, all drifted away, dissolving into pleasant numbness. The two boys submerged completely, as if hypnotized, lost in a falsely gentle world of silence and warmth. The monk focused. Symbols appeared in his mind, alien, sharp, inhuman. He chose one and concentrated energy upon it. The sign began to vibrate. The priest raised his hand. Light flashed. The two boys fell into a deep sleep, unaware of what had just begun. Rain felt that something was wrong. His entire body floated in a dense, viscous substance, sticky against his skin like a foreign hand. A mask covered his mouth, tight against his face, from which protruded a thick, pulsating cable. With every breath, he heard a soft hiss, as if a machine were breathing with him. He opened his eyes. He was inside a glass tube. Its surface was covered in scratches, chaotic, desperate marks easily mistaken for human fingernail impressions. Someone had struck this glass, many times, until blood was drawn. Rain began to thrash. He punched the transparent wall again and again until pain shot through his arms. The glass did not even tremble. It was too thick, too solid, not designed to protect his life but to contain it. Thoughts swirled in his head, fear, panic, helplessness. He did not know where he was. He did not know what had been done to him. He only knew that something had gone terribly wrong. On the other side of the glass stood two men in white coats, and the silent monk. They looked at the tube without a trace of emotion, as if at a tool that had not yet fulfilled its function. "Subject 5, no reaction so far," one of the men said in a calm, almost bored tone. "Maybe we should increase the dose," the other replied. "The previous ones mutated too quickly." Without paying Rain the slightest attention, they approached a nearby lamp and extinguished it with a single motion. The light vanished. The boy was left alone, sealed in glass, submerged in sticky fluid, plunged into absolute darkness. He screamed. He called for help, but only in his thoughts. His voice had nowhere to go. The monk left last. He did not even turn around. And yet, in Rain's mind, his voice resounded, cold, heavy, unyielding. Gaia will thank you for your sacrifice. Where is my student? Aris asked. Metal rang in his voice. He slammed his hand on the table at which the silent monk sat. The stone answered with a dull, indifferent sound. I haven't seen him for several weeks. He was delegated to another dragon. The monk's voice was cold, alien. It crawled into the alchemist's mind like chill beneath the skin and left behind a bitter residue that could not be shaken off. An ordinary citizen would have been punished for such insolence. But alchemists stood higher in the world's hierarchy, too high to be easily silenced. They could afford anger, sometimes even questions. Then why doesn't he write to me? Aris asked, irritation already breaking through his rage. The monk did not even look at him. You know how it is. New position, new environment. No time. A moment of silence. Next, the word fell between them like a slammed door. Aris walked away, slowly, heavily. Unease settled in his chest, sticky, vague, like a shadow that cannot be lost. He wanted to believe his student was safe, that the world, cruel as it was, had not yet reached for what mattered most to him. And yet, deep in his heart, something whispered, stubbornly and mercilessly, to stop asking, to let it go. Journal entry: Aris Klein, The Secrets of Alchemy. Why are all alchemists considered eccentrics? As is commonly known, alchemy and herbalism are closely related disciplines. Both concern themselves with the preparation of potions and compounds with various effects. Yet they differ in far more ways than might appear at first glance. Herbalism is based on observing nature and submitting to its laws. Alchemy, however, reaches deeper. It is far closer to philosophy and psychology than to simple craftsmanship. Few truly understand where the boundary between these disciplines truly lies. Alchemy is a magical science. It teaches us the transformation of states of being, changes not only of form, but of essence itself. Not every alchemist can prepare every potion, just as no herbalist can ever fully command the forces of nature. But what, then, is this nature of things? From our earliest years, we are taught that a thing is what it is. When you look at a sphere made of aluminum, you know what it is. When you see an animal, you can name it. We learn numbers, words, emotions. We learn what is good and what is evil. Yet the world is not so simple. All of these concepts are merely aspects, frameworks created by sentient beings to impose order upon reality. Everything is fluid. Everything is and is not. From this thought arose the deepest alchemical knowledge, homunculi. One of the first alchemists of our era observed that thoughts exert a real influence upon the world. He therefore posed a question no one before him had dared to speak aloud. What happens if a thing loses its being, the framework into which humanity has placed it? What if someone, with all their heart and soul, truly believes that a thing is not what it has been defined as? The alchemist began his experiment in complete isolation. Day after day, he convinced himself that the piece of wood he possessed was not wood. He tasted it, smelled it, touched it. In time, lacking companionship, he began to speak to it. He told it about his life, his thoughts, his doubts. After some time, the wood began to vibrate, to change its state. At first, the alchemist believed he had lost his senses, yet he did not abandon the experiment. He gave the piece of wood a name, Naru, and continued his research. Naru responded more and more clearly to his words, until one day thoughts entered the old man's mind that were not his own. They were not words, but sensations, primitive, raw, like something that should not be able to feel. The alchemist went a step further. He carved a doll from the wood, giving it shape. Over the following years, he imagined Naru moving beside him, helping with everyday tasks. And after many years, Naru truly moved. The bond between them grew ever stronger. Responding to the alchemist's thoughts, Naru could change shape and hardness. This phenomenon was named the homunculus, a liminal being, an artificial essence of things. In later ages, other alchemists repeated the experiment. It turned out that not only wood could undergo this process, metal, minerals, and even other forms of matter reacted in a similar way. Then another question was asked. What if thoughts influence not only what exists? Thus arose the emoji, entities that at first existed solely within the alchemist's mind, beings that broke the law of existence. They were, despite possessing no true body, and yet they affected the material world. This art proved extraordinarily dangerous. A single moment of doubt was enough for the experiment to end in failure. Rejecting the laws that govern the human world left a permanent mark upon the researcher's mind. For this reason, most alchemists confined themselves to physical homunculi. Those who encountered alchemists along their path all said the same thing. They were strange. For generations, these mechanisms were studied. Today we know they are connected to the way gods are born and how miracles come to pass. Yet no one has ever fully mastered this phenomenon. And perhaps that is precisely why alchemists will always inspire fear.